In this episode, I'm going to cover creating a Flutter plugin. I'll start by creating a plugin, then I'll open it up in the editors. After that, I'll get the data from the native Android and iOS APIs. Then I'll push the data from the Android and iOS. Then I'll show how to use the Flutter plugins as a reference for writing more plugin. So to get started, I'm going to go to the terminal. What I want to do is create a project for my plugin. And the way I do that, I go Flutter, create, --plugin, and then the name of my plugin. So this will be my generic plugin. And then I'm going to enter to generate the project. Now that the project is generated, I want to open it up in the editors. And so what I use is IntelliJ to get started, and I'm going to select open. From here, I'm going to navigate to the directory that I created, and it's my generic plugin. I'm going to select open. Once the project is open, I'm going to select project and open up the directory structure. In this structure, there's several bits, and that's Android, iOS, and the library directory. And I want to open up example separately. And the way I do that is going to File, Open, and I'm going to navigate into the plugin and open up example. And this is an example application written for this plugin. Okay, so once example is opened, example looks like a regular project. And what I want to do is delete the comments so it's a little bit cleaner for my tutorial. So I'm going to do // and I want to delete the comments, replace all auto formatting, and I'm ready to go. And if I look down, scroll down here, I'm looking for the platform version. This is in an async method, which takes care of the future here. And we're waiting for the future to complete. We get the platform version. The platform version is then re-rendered in the center of the widget. So the next step is I want to test it. And so I'm going to select a device, and I'll select Android to start and then test it. Okay, it works on Android. The platform version is then set to the center of the page. That's great. The next step is I want to test iOS. So I'm going to stop the Android version, and then I'm going to change to iOS, iPhone, and hit run. Okay, both iOS and Android worked, so I'm ready for the next step. And the first thing I like to do is point out that this example application would be an example of using my plugin. So if I scroll down and I look at my generic plugin and command click on platform version, it goes to the plugin and the Dart packages. And this is a reference to the plugin. And I opened it up in the other editor. If I open up the other editor, here it is, my generic plugin with example Android, iOS, and Lib. And I'm going to cover this in more detail in a moment. But I'm going to go back to the example application and just show that you can see the exact same thing. Now, I probably could edit it from here, but I won't. I'm going to show how to edit in the other directory. So I'm going to close this. So this platform version, what I want to do is change this to something, and I want to get something else. I want to show the process of wiring up my own getter. And then this getter is passed off to Android and iOS depending on the client that's being used. And we'll get the data from those versions. So how do I do that? How would I wire something up? Let's say I want to do this as my something getter. How would I wire that up? So I'm going to go ahead and show how to do that. So I'm going to go back to the other IntelliJ editor. I'm going to start with looking at the Dart library directory. And here's where the channel is wired up, and this is the method channel. And I'm going to put these on one line to show. So here's my plugin name. I want to first start by changing my plugin name to something globally unique. So I'm going to go at github.com/my generic plugin. I'm going to copy this here. Now it's globally unique. I have to change it in the other locations that I use it. So that's in iOS classes, and this is the implementation. And if you look in here, here's my generic plugin. So I'm going to paste and change that. And then I'm going to go to Android, and then I'm going to change it in Android by going to the source Java and my generic plugin, and I want to change it here as well. So before I change it to something, I better test this just to make sure it works. So I'm going to Control Z, go back and save it. And then I'm going to hit, since it's a structural change, I got to restart the application. So I'm going to restart it. So it has to be changed in 3 spots, the Dart, iOS, and Android. And if it all works here, it should work fine. So I'm testing it on iPhone first. So it's building and we'll push it out. Great, it works on iOS. I got to check Android. So I'm going to stop and change to Android and run it again. Great, it works on Android as well. So I've changed the plugin names right in the correct locations. Now I'm going to change this back to something because that's the next step I was on. Change this to something. So I got to go back to the other editor. And now I'm ready to change to something. And it's got an error there because I changed that. So if I go in the Dart library, I want to add a something method. I want to make this a little bit smaller so I can see more. So I can put that on a new line. Let's auto format, see what happens here. Okay, so I'm going to copy this future and I'm going to make my own future, literally. And I'm going to put something and I'm going to say get something. And this is a new method. I'm going to get something on iOS and Android, depending on which client I'm using. So the next step is to go to Android. And I'm going to show this in the editor to start with, the generic editing. And I'll show how to edit it in Android and iOS in a moment. So basically, here we go. I'm going to say on method call, here's the get platform version. And this is what it returns on that method call. Well, I'm going to add my own method call. So I'm going to add in the if statement here. So I'm going to copy that by going Control C and pasting it in. And it's an else if now. And then I'm going to return the result here. Result. I just copy it because I don't have auto assist on. Copy it. And I'm going to return something else. I got to change the method name. Now it's get something. Get something. And I'm going to go something works on Android. I can put it Android. Okay, so that's Android. I need to do it in iOS. So I'm going to go down to the implementation. And it has an if statement as well. And I'm going to copy that and paste it in and go else. I'm not doing formatting here. I'm not worried about that. So here's the string it evaluates. So I'm going to go get something instead at string and then is equal to the method. And then I'm going to return something else. So I can result and string and terminate the line. And so then I'm going to go, it works on iOS too. Okay, so I should have that right. So I've done, let me look at that again. I've wired up my something method, which says get something. It invokes the method on the method channel. That is then passed off to the class in iOS. And here we have the Flutter method channel, which is the receiver. Get something, it compares it to the method, and then it works on iOS, it returns. Okay, this is a good time to say, what can I return in the data types of this result? So let me look at that. That's the Flutter guide. So if I go to the Flutter guide, I'm already there. So if I look at the platform channels, which can be clicked on here, the platform specific code and custom platform specific code. Well, anyways, on this page, I'm looking for platform channel data types. And here we go for the mapping data types and the system types that it responds to. Maybe we'll see fuchsia in the future, but hey, here we go. So here's the data type mappings. I won't cover these in detail today. That'll be another episode. So if I go back to the IDE editor, I'm going to go back up to Intel or Android and just confirm. Here's the method call, get something, and here's the result. Something works on Android. Okay, so I'm ready to test it. So first one I want to test, I'm going to go back to the example. So if I go back to the example, here's the example, and I'm on Android, so I'm going to hit debug. Here's debug up here, here's debug down here. By the way, here's hot reload, the little lightning. By the way, you can't use hot reload when you're making structure changes in the background in the plugin. You've got to actually restart the system so it'll build both the plugin and the example application. Okay, something works on Android. Excellent. Now I'm going to terminate this process and go to the iPhone SE simulator, and then I'm going to hit debug. So excellent. Something works on Android and iOS. So let me review what I just did. So in my plugin, I provided a new getter method. If I command click on this something, you can see it goes down into the Dart packages because I'm in my example application accessing my plugin. So I'm going to switch over to where I edit the plugin, and I'm focused in my generic Dart library, and this defines my method channel with my globally unique plugin name. And then I have two getters here, a platform version and get something. So once I said if I call something, it invokes the method get something. This is then passed off to the native client code for Android or iOS. And here I go on method call. It says call is get something. Then it returns with success. Something works on Android. Well, instead of passing something works on Android, I could say get something, get accelerometer XYZ, and pass those back in this call. Or I could say get mapping coordinates, and I can pass that back in this call. You could access any API as long as you construct it properly. And I'll cover that a little bit more in a moment. So the iOS, if I look at the iOS implementation, it's the same as Android, except for the iOS Objective-C talk. We say this. The method says get something, then get something is equal to this method, then we return the result. So that's how you can wire up a getter and get native client data on both Android and iOS depending on the system you're on. So what if you wanted to push data from the Android client or the iOS client? So the same process happens in reverse. So now that I've showed how to edit these three files on an IntelliJ IDEA without the native environment such as Xcode and Android or Android Studio. So let me show you how to edit these in Android Studio and Xcode and do the same process. So if I open up Android Studio, I'm going to open up an existing Android project, and I'm going to navigate to my training directory, Flutter, my generic plugin, and the Android directory, and click on OK. I'm going to select OK because it will set up Gradle. And then I'm going to navigate over here to the left and then open up the project, Java, and then my plugin directory. Well, you can see that my class path is not resolving the method call handler. And that's because it's not added to the Gradle script or Gradle path over here. So I could temporarily add a library to complete this, and I'll show you how I do that. So I'm going to right click on the project and go to Open Module Settings. And then in this module, I can go to Dependencies and add a library. But before I do that, I have to add a directory. And I'm going to add, I can't do it in the Android view, so I'm going to go to the project view, open it up, and I'm going to add a temporary directory. And I'm going to call this temp libs. And in this library directory, I want to add the Flutter directory. So I'm going to go to my file manager. I already have it navigated there. So in the Flutter Git project and the bin directory, cache, and artifacts, engine, and I'm going to copy the x64. It doesn't matter because I'm just going to use this to resolve the class path at runtime. So I'm going to paste it into my temp libs directory. Click OK. Right click on it and go add as library. Well, this is going to create an error because there could be multiple decks, or there'll be a dex warning with multiple problems. So I'm going to open up the module settings and change the scoping on the library provision. So I'm going to go to the modules, dependencies, and I do not want this on the compile scope. I'm going to say provided because when the compiler runs, the Flutter project will provide the class path or wiring for this library, Flutter library. Okay, so I'm okay here. This resolves the type here and I'm ready to go. But before I do anything else, I want to test it to make sure the wiring is proper. So I'm going to go back to the example project And the example project is here. I'm going to terminate the previous process, go to Android because I am testing Android. Select Android up here and run it, debug it. Okay, so it works. Everything is wired up properly, and I'm not getting a DEX error like I would be if that was on the compile scope. So let me go back to the Android Studio. And what I want to show next is how to push data to the Android client from this method. So let's say I added a timer just for effect. An activity could come in with an intent and say, hey, notify my Flutter client that I have some new data for it. So how am I going to simulate this? Let's say I'm going to add a timer. And I'm going to say timer equals new timer. Okay, so I've got to import this, import the class, and I'm in a timer.schedule at a fixed rate, and I'm going to say I'm going to run a task with a delay of, let's say, 5,000 and 5,000 every 5 seconds. So this task, I got to create the task, create a local variable. Okay, so equals new timer task, and I'm going to hoist this up just above here, and then this is going to be anonymous class. I need to auto implement the methods, run, and then I'll remove the space. Okay, what do I want to run? So I'm going to say channel. Okay, so I'm in the final scope of this channel, so I'll have access to it here in this anonymous class. So I'm going to invoke a method. This will invoke a method and then pass back to tell Flutter, hey, I'm going to send you some data. So I'm going to say callback as the method just for effect, and then I'm going to say one argument, and it's going to be a string, and I'm going to say this callback from Android works. Okay, that's cool. So I'm ready to go. Let's test that. So how would I test this? How would I call back? I got to actually wire up the other side of Flutter now. So how would I do that? So I'm going to go back to the Flutter project. Okay, so I'm going to go to the plugin project, and I'm going to wire up a method that says static, let's see here. How would I do this? Underscore channel, and then I'm going to set a method call handler, and then I'm just going to delegate to this from here. So I'm going to change, whoops. Yeah, I want to change that to void, and I'm going to say handler. So I'm going to go to the superclass and get the type and put the type in. So I'm going to copy this and go back to the plugin and put that in. So here we go. Now we have the type definition and the parameter here, and it just delegates. And I'm doing in this my generic plugin. So there's a little bit of delegation, so I don't have to actually type this into the example plugin. I can just say set handler and then pass it a method or function, and that'll delegate. Okay, so now that I have that ready, so I'm going to go to the example project, and I want to listen for events that occur from my native device that get pushed. Okay, so if I'm in the example, I'm going to go to the main. So I'm going to go in it, call back handler, and make this a private method. So, and then I'll use autocomplete to create this as a method in this class. Well, I'm going to hoist it up. So once I've hoisted the method up, I want to go my generic plugin, and then I'm going to set a method, and then it's going to be a method call, and I'll say call, and then I'll do inner body here, and I'll do an anonymous function, and on call if call.method.equals, let's see, equals, what did I name it? So I'm going to go back to the plugin. So if I go back to Android here, okay, I just named it callback. So if callback, so I go back to where it was. If callback, then what do I want to do? Let's go set state. Let's see, I want to do the same thing here. So I'm going to copy this and paste it in here and just say call.arguments. I think that I just have one argument, so I can do that and update it. So, well, let me review what I just did. So and describe what I just did. So I'm going to go back to Android Studio. So when I register the method channel, I'm going to say timer task is scheduled for every 5 seconds, delay of 5 seconds. I'll run this task. This task will then call channel invoke method callback. This callback works from Android. So I'm going to pass this data, this string, to the Flutter channel. So if I go back to my application, my example application, where's example? Example application here, I'm listening now for set method handler. And then when the call comes in, I'll evaluate that and say compare to this method as a callback. I'm going to say fetch these arguments, and then I'm going to re-render the platform version, which is basically the center text. So I can go ahead and restart it because I've did structural changes. And if all goes well, it should work great. Oh, there it changed. Okay, one more thing I want to do here. I can't tell if it's calling over and over because I did repeating calls. So if I go back to Android Studio, let me just enhance this a little bit. Let me add a private static int count equals 0. And let's say down here, I go plus count plus plus. I changed it. Now I'm going to go back to my example. Example should be rerun, so let me restart that. Now it should increment every time it updates every 5 seconds. Let me just verify that works. Okay, something works. 0. Let's see if it updates in 5 seconds. 1. Excellent. So it's going to update every 5 seconds. This is getting pushed from Android to my Flutter application from Android. So that's really cool. So both can I get data from Android or iOS. I can send data from Android or iOS. So that's really cool. So how would I do that in iOS? Let me look at that. So if I did that in iOS, how would I open up and look at that in Xcode? So what I want to do is open up the files in Xcode. So if I go back to the plugin here, go back to the plugin, my plugin, and I'm going to go to iOS classes, and here's the 2 classes. I'm going to select them, and I'm going to drag them right over to my Xcode. So Xcode is right here, and there we go. It opens up in Xcode. Well, at this time, I can't open that project up in Xcode. Maybe in the future it'll be easier, I suspect, because it's a new project, but right now, I'm just going to drag them over, and then this is file editing only. So instead of wiring up the timer task like I did in Android, which you could do right here, I could add a timer that invoked the same method. Instead of wiring it up, I'm just going to show you where it's done in the Flutter plugins. So if I go to the Flutter plugins, this is a great place to, so if I use IntelliJ, I can go File, Open, and I've already imported the plugins, but if I go File, Open, and I go to my Git directory, and I go Plugins, and I can open up the plugins. The plugins are a perfect place to look for iOS and Android implementation, and you can copy what they've done. And the best one, I think, to do that from is the Firebase database plugin because it's bidirectional. It gets data and sends data. So you can look in the Firebase database, and here we go, Android and iOS classes, and here's the implementation. And here we go, register, and you can look to see, we go invoke data. Here's it's added, it sends back some arguments, and then the arguments are key and a value. So this is a perfect place to compare what has been written in Flutter, and you can use these examples to write your own plugins. So this is the Flutter plugins, and this is an excellent place to reference how to write a plugin. So that concludes creating a Flutter plugin. Thanks for watching. Follow me for more tips and tricks, and I'll catch you later.